Right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is our twice yearly look into the world outside of the world of communications marketing and marketing services. We're joined by two leading professionals today who are going to give us insights into what's happening in the world from both agency land as well as also in the wider sphere from business and business confidence and also politically. So very broad range of different subject matter we'll cover today. For those that haven't met me, my name is Stephen Knight. I'm the CEO and founder of Pimento. And it's great to have you with us today. Hopefully, you'll go away with lots of insights and lots of information that you can readily use in your own communications to your clients and to the brands that you work with. And also, hopefully, it will help you to understand exactly how the market is from an agency point of view at the moment. And it's fair to say it's been a pretty tough period for lots of agencies. And I speak to agencies day in, day out, as does David and the rest of the partner directors at Pimento. And all of us are, I guess, feeling the heat at the moment, both physically as well as economically. And today's latest announcement on inflation, creeping up 3.6%, doesn't exactly help. We are recording today's session, so open up your cameras, smile throughout. We will have time to take questions. So in a moment, I'll hand over to our first speaker. And at the end of Annabel Dunstan's presentation, there'll be opportunities to ask questions. But if you want to put questions into the question box at the bottom of the screen, please do, or you can raise a hand and we'll come to you. As ever, I want to make this as interactive as possible. Our two speakers today, I'm welcoming back Oliver Wright, who is the EVP, Head of Public and Corporate Insight at the research and polling agency Savanta. Most of you will have seen Ollie in action over the years. He oversees Savanta's work across government and not-for-profit sector, as well as the polling that they do. They compete with the good and the great and often actually have more up-to-date polls and better insight than a lot of their competitors. Previously, he was managing director at communications and public policy research agency Comres. We also have first the wonderful Annabel Dunstan, founder and CEO of Question and Retain. She's asked me to tell you she's got a very bad head cold, so hopefully she will manage to get through her slides. Annabel, as you know, is an accomplished entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Question and Retain, and they're a leading insights consultancy that specialize in employee experience, client and member satisfaction measurement tools. And she works very closely with the Alliance of Independent Agencies who have sponsored the piece of research she's going to share with us today. So I think that's it, unless I've forgotten anything. All we'll do at the end is share some forthcoming activities and events that we've got coming up. But otherwise, let's eyes down, full house. Start with Annabel, and I will.
Yeah, I think you can see that. Can I just have a thumbs up that you can see that?
We are
Great.
good to go.
So as Stephen said, I have a ridiculous cold. How can people get colds in the middle of summer? But here I am with one. And the other thing to mention is I don't have a glass with me, but I have my bottle. It's not vodka, it's just water, just in case anyone was worried. Great, so without further ado, I'll click for the first slide. So the People Pass, for those of you that might not be familiar with it, we run it with the Alliance. We're running it now twice a year. We found that 4 times was a bit overkill, particularly when everyone was facing economic challenges and they really wanted to be heads down on new biz. But we felt it was really important. Twice a year, we check in with several hundred employees across agency land. So we had 659 responses for the first quarter's results this year. 57 agencies represented, and 33 of those, at least 6 of their staff responded. And so that means they then received their own tailored report by their agency, which was then compared to the aggregate data. Today, I'll be sharing the overall picture, but of course, within that, there'll be pockets of agencies that have very good results and those that have much less good. And we've asked questions looking at employee sentiment across a whole range of metrics. We've got 10 questions. The first one's around pride, but we're going to be looking at opportunities to voice opinions, so respect, whether they feel they're enjoying life in agency land, and perceptions of the culture, including diversity and inclusion, their training and development opportunities, approaches to sustainability, leadership comms and clarity around that, mental health and well-being and how well they feel their agency supports that or not, intentions to remain at the agency, a really interesting question, and then recognition for their contribution. So it's a whole smorgasbord, and these are questions that we ask twice a year through the People Pulse. And if you're not already asking your employees this, then please do get involved. It's free of charge to you to get involved, and you just need the link. We're now live with the second half of the year's People Pulse. It was just launched this week, and we'll be reporting on that in September, October. So you've got a chance to get involved if you're not currently asking these questions yourselves. So you can see the data. We've got 4 or 5 years worth of data now, but we're just showing you the last 5 quarters. And you can see the trends hold fairly steady with pride. Many indicated they feel pride to work at their agency, which we feel is a real key metric of whether they were going to stay and go their extra mile for you as leaders. But some individuals expressed a lack of pride, stating not at all, indicating that can fluctuate depending on the project or the business's financial situation. And I suppose that comes through from whether they feel secure or not. That knocks on into their sense of pride around working at the agency. And some feel a disconnect between the work done and what's showcased externally. So you might be going great guns on the social media outwardly, but it might not actually be what they're feeling internally. So we saw a few comments around that, which was quite interesting. So something to watch out for. Are you being authentic about what's really going on with your team? Encouragement to voice your opinions. So all around respect and trust. Again, holding steady around 56% saying yes, they are. We haven't seen huge shifts, except if we look back at Q1, so same time this time last year, a lot more feeling, yeah, they are. And it feels like perhaps things have tightened around that. So 66 dropping down to 56% a year on, which can come from people, yeah, tightening is the word I wanted to use, their ability to let you get on and do stuff, perhaps criticising when leadership is feeling under pressure rather than allowing staff and junior members in particular to speak up. Some believe that only senior or long tenured staff are truly heard. So behind all this quant data, of course, we collect the qual, that's the gold dust in all research, I would argue. And so the comments that sit behind this are telling us that there's no point, some are saying there's no point in voicing opinions if senior teams only hear what they want to. And a few reported not really when they're encouraged to voice opinions. So looking at those comments on the right, we always try and give a positive one in green and a less positive one in the amber. So making this relevant to you, if you sat around your board table now, what would your consensus be about what your team are saying? And hopefully you're erring towards the green comments. But if you've got anything that resonates with the red, then really make that an action point. Do build respect and trust, because that's what's going to help people to stay loyal and stay wanting to go the extra mile and be productive with you. Enjoyment. We love this question. We introduced it, I think this is the 5th quarter we've run this question, because working in agency land and the creative sector should be fun, you know, and for your clients coming to see you at your agency, that should be the highlight of their month. You're the ones with the ideas and communicating great creative ideas for their brands. So has that changed? And it's quite tragic that only 14% say it's more fun, and the bulk is sitting in that about the same, and over a quarter saying it's less fun, and a very sad person saying it's never been fun. So I guess they're thinking of leaving. But the fact that we've got nearly a third, 28% saying it's never been fun is something to think about. Sorry, it's been less fun is something to watch out for, because yeah, people want all those factors, the salary, the training, the benefits, and the camaraderie, but they also want to have some level of enjoyment at work. And you've got this sense on the right, I'm so busy, I don't ever get everything finished in the day. It feels impossible to have fun when the whole team is stressed and overworked as a result. Everyone is wound tight. That word tight and stress and frustration came up quite a lot when we analysed the words that were shared. So again, long, hard look back at base as an action. Perhaps your Monday morning meeting next week, are you helping to loosen that frustration and stress amongst your team? Dee and I, we've seen this really struggle, and I think, you know, priorities perhaps drop away, and there was some talk last year, is there a sense that it's something nice to have, and yet all the evidence shows that actually it's commercial sense to have good D&I embedded within your agency. So you've got some very positive comments, really fantastic programs that not only look good on paper, but are changing the dynamic of our team on the ground. And that's a real standout comment. And again, something for you to reflect on, is that your experience of looking over recruitment practices, looking at the makeup of your team from BAME through to neurodiversity and different educational levels coming into your organisation. Are you expounding everything you can do on that? There's some brilliant initiatives out there. I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Waddington. He's got Social Mobility, a company called Social Mobility, really encouraging diversity and inclusion into agencies. If you haven't, I can give you his details. Really inspiring person to chat to. And again, you've got the negative comment. It's very odd in such a multicultural city and country that a company of over 60 has nearly zero diversity. Clients have commented on this too. So clients and procurement are looking at this. I know the squeeze is on is just getting that business in the door, but maybe make some simple tweaks to your recruitment process to make sure you've got that representation. Not simple, I know that nothing's simple in agency land, is it? Training and development, this is a big part of the Alliance's offer. They're all about training and development. So looking at your team, are you developing their strengths? We've got a really nice uplift, and I think that's partly due to the Alliance really promoting their courses, making them very accessible, both price-wise and times of day, online and so forth. But yeah, there's been a jump from 46% saying yes, they offer training to develop themselves professionally, up to 53%. And we know that through difficult times, those businesses that invest in learning and development tend to emerge fitter, leaner, more agile going forward. And of course, the big area for this is AI, the AI words. And what are you doing to make yourself future fit? Stephen was talking earlier before we started this call around the Chambers of Commerce a conference he went to, and Ollie and I were sharing thoughts on AI, and that you do need to future-proof your agents. If you're not already on that curve, then today is the day. And there's some great information out there and courses, and Alliance are part of that offer. It's always been the bugbear in agency land to be able to offer training and people to actually take it up, because they feel the pressure that the client work is paramount, and then training drops down the agenda. So you as leaders need to make sure that you carve out time that's part of the resource plan that your team are getting trained. Because if you can't offer it, then people will be looking elsewhere in order to get that training and the next step up the ladder in terms of their understanding. Sustainability, again, a bit like DE&I, it can go off the boil a little, and when agencies are feeling the pinch. Percentage of employees rating the approach to sustainability is really good, has shown a modest upward trend, just a 3% up there on the really good. But again, to attract the talent of the future, sustainability, DE&I are real top watch points. What are you doing? What have you got in place? Are you doing the very basics at the very least? But you've got this lovely comment here. I've never worked somewhere where sustainability, despite the typo in this, where sustainability was a major part of everyday businesses, everyday business running. They're really hot on it. We've redacted the agency name. But again, that's part of award entries, attracting new business, particularly if you're working with big brands who are looking to up the ante in their sustainability departments, then you really need to be leading the way and walking the talk. But yeah, you've got 10% saying not very good or poor. So that's 1 in 10 agencies represented here have got a poor record on sustainability. So opportunities to be different from your competitors. This one always flummoxes me because we're in the business of communication. So to have the leadership communications rated poorly by a good whack of people, 7 + 9 + 2, saying we're unsure or not very clearly or not at all clearly, is quite extraordinary. And as I said, there are some agencies in this that perform incredibly well in this, will be getting 100% really clearly, but some that are just not there. And that's through a range of things: lack of transparency, lack of clarity around direction, and dodging the issues when prominent concerns were raised. So all of those are fixable if you have the ability to be authentic and non-defensive. Not always easy, but far better that you've got high ratings on your leadership, because that's why people are going to stick around with you, as I say, go the extra mile. A little bit of a rise there, and I think again that's been around training, and we have really banged this message home quite a lot. So it's jumped from really clearly from 34 up to 43, so a positive trend, but one again that you can look at your own agency. Where are you on that scale? Mental health, it's a pretty grim picture, and of course we're just asking agency staff about their mental health, and of course external factors are going to play their part. They'll be feeling cost of living pinch, the existential crisis, the wars, and perhaps if we'd asked this after a phenomenal week of sport last week, there might have been a slight rise, but we're in the place where at -14, the Alliance created this deck for us, and of course that should be -14. It's not a percentage, it's just a number, -14. And that's doubly low compared to Q1 2024, which was at -7 on the NPS scale of -100 to 100. So anything above 0, as you will know, is deemed good. So to be at -14 in Q1 is pretty grim. What we generally see is that track downwards over the year. So goodness knows where we'll be at the end of 2025. But a real watch point. And so this year we asked for the first time, this quarter we asked for the first time how well you're doing, how well your agency is in optimising your mental health. So putting the onus perhaps on agency leaders to do their part more fully. And it's quite a pleasing picture. And you've got 12% in that bottom section there saying, I'm struggling but feel supported, I'm struggling and feel unsupported. So just over 1 in 10 of that sample, so it's around 70 people out of our 660, have said that they are struggling with their mental health. So again, all of this is anonymised, and I wouldn't want you to pick out people in your own agency who might be struggling, but that's the aggregate figure across independent agencies right now. So food for thought. A good third saying I'm thriving and feel well supported, and some standout comments. I cannot thank my line manager enough. And that line manager should be in bold, because often the line manager is the one that could and should and really needs to pick up on when their line reports are struggling. And so that quality of line management is really key. And we know, I think the latest figures are something like 83%. The CIPD gave this figure out recently. 83% of people who leave cite their line manager as the issue and the reason they moved on. So line management have huge need for training, but looking out for that mental health stuff, really key. Future employment, are you going to stay in your agency for the next 12 months? So 3/4, that's held steady, slight dip from Q1 last year, and just slightly up on Q4 at the end of last year, to 72% saying they intend to stay. And then we've got 12% saying they'd rather not stay. The legend has dropped off. I'm going to have to tick Terry Martin off at the Alliance for that. But it's a consistent picture, and the fact that you've got 12 plus 3 and 1 not committing to saying whether they're going to stay or not is quite a sizable chunk. So over 25%, 1 in 4 saying they're not definitely going to stay. And of course, that's useful to you. Sometimes you do want some churn, natural churn. You don't always get it right when you recruit, and you do want some people to move on because they might be round pegs and square holes. But make sure that you're talking to your lifeboat crew, i.e. those that you really want to grow and train, and perhaps be succession management. Make sure they're not part of that 25% that are having other thoughts. So don't leave it to exit interviews to find out what's going wrong. Do lifeboat crew interviews and find out what's keeping them there at the moment, because there are often small fixes that will engender greater loyalty and sticking power. Okay. Recognition. Do you feel that you get recognition for your contribution to the agency? Again, we've got that holding steady at about 1/3 saying, yes, I am. Members of the senior leadership team will reach out to you personally and let you know when you're doing a good job. And these could be simple things. The recognition can come from a handwritten letter from you to one of your team at their home address. My goodness, I've mentioned this many times over my career, the impact that had on me when I was a junior, and I think I've still got the card in my box file somewhere. It really has a standout moment, and you feel noticed. Maybe that's just a personality thing, but I think it goes a long way, and it doesn't have to cost any money. Recognition does not have to cost money. Sometimes my department is left out of recognition because our work is often done in silence in comparison to others. So encouraging people to showcase their work, have public lunchtime listen and learn sessions where you do a case study of some recent successful work. So everyone learns and those people involved get the recognition they deserve. That's a big part of why people choose to stay with their agency. And that is it. Thank you for listening and to listening to my slightly bunged up voice. I'm not quite on form today, but I'm happy to take any questions and go back to any of the data if that's useful to you.
Thank you. I think you did very well considering you're not feeling top this morning. So thank you very much, Annabel, for that. Before we go on to have a look at the kind of the macro level, shall we? There's a few questions coming in now. Alex, some sacks next time too, please. I think that says sacks. Exceptional, Annabel. Thank you very much from Ben. So all platitudes. Does anybody want to actually ask any questions? You've got Annabel available to take some questions. No? Okay, well, we're going to go on and then don't worry if you've got further questions because we can come back to it at the
just put his
end.
hand up. Russell White, put his hand up.
Mr. White,
He's
let's
on
take you off.
mute. There we go.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Hi Annabel.
Hi.
I just had a question on on how you sampled, how you do the survey. Do you break down? Do you segment in terms of the actual levels of the people who are actually responding? Because I just wonder whether, if you're asking, say, a group account director, as opposed to an account exec or a creative, as opposed to someone maybe working on production, you might get sort of a different sort of I guess a different answer or a different way in which they would potentially sort of I guess their experiences may be different given the actual sort of function that they do in an agency, and it just might be interesting to compare kind of how an account handler feels versus someone in production or creative.
Yeah, I would love to be able to say we did, but the sample sizes per agency would give us very small sample sizes. So we're dealing with SMEs where there might be 20 staff. And if you start breaking it down to juniors, we might get 1 or 2 responses from juniors and 4 from middle management and 2 from senior. And that just becomes anecdotal data rather than a really strong trend. But I'll feed that back to the Alliance if there was any way that we could create just maybe a junior and a senior, like split the agency across that level. Very happy to put that back to them. But at the moment we are, you know what it's like getting survey responses, and I'm sure Ollie will echo that. It's blood out of water sometimes. So to get 660, we want to give you really robust data and to split it down into much smaller groups. It's not appropriate at the moment. But if it grew to 2,000, I would happily give you that breakdown.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So sample size. Nicole Martin from Pinpoint Marketing. When asking people if they were thinking of leaving or those that said yes, did they say why? And were they asked why out of interest?
Yes. So in the qualitative data, reasons for considering included a feeling that the direction of the agency is shifting away from great work. So in other words, the agency was kind of scrabbling and going for stuff that perhaps wasn't core to their values or why they joined the agency in the first place. Lack of career progression, being overworked and sense of underpay or not keeping pace with inflation, and a general feeling of being undervalued or unsupported. So they were the themes that came through. So
okay. All the questions are coming now.
Yeah,
It's flooding
the
in.
opportunity there is to flip all of those that I've said into positives. So treating each of those challenges into an opportunity. So, for example, and maybe I'm teaching to suck eggs here, but direction of the agency is shifting away from great work. Well, it might be a communication issue. Why is that agency taking on different work? Is it just a commercial imperative, or is it that the leaders want to do more in automotive or whatever it might be? So explaining why you're doing stuff often stops that, nips that in the bud of people feeling disenfranchised.
Yeah. I mean, good communication, town halls, getting people together, which of course is one of the things that's been more difficult post-COVID because obviously people are working different hours and from different places, but it's not impossible. Jeremy makes a good point. Is there a noticeable difference depending on the size of the agency? Smaller agencies are more sensitive to individual needs.
Yeah, again, we don't split by size of agency until we've got that sort of magic. I would like to have 2,000 responses before we start really dissecting that more fully. I would say, yeah, I don't want to give any more than that at the moment.
Okay. Molly's question relates to the ranking of the importance of some of the key factors that you survey. So, for example, L&D. So, do you ask them to rank what is most important to them out of these factors, e.g., L&D? Is that more important than, say, recognition, etc., etc.?
No, we haven't ranked them. We've kept the survey very much a pulse check of 10 questions that we've kept static in terms of benchmarking it each quarter. But I'll note that and feed that back to the Alliance, of course.
Okay. Josh Hatton, has there been a difference pre and post COVID? I don't think, did we do this before COVID?
Yes, we've been doing this since 2019, so 6 years of data now, I believe we've got. And yeah, I mean, overall, if I were to look at the data back then to now, it's a slightly tragic picture in terms of employee sentiment. It's definitely tracked downwards compared to the pre-COVID, more buoyant era. So I think issues around workload versus pressures to bring the biz in and develop, create profitable campaigns. Enjoyment's gone down. Mental health has gone down. So some areas have had moderate positive trends. So DEI and sustainability, oddly, because I thought those would just drop away with the pressures, have tracked upwards slightly, and training and development has tracked upwards. But the mental health and well-being has certainly decreased. And of course, there are lots of people living, there's millions with long COVID, so they're in the workplace, but suffering health-wise as well as mental health-wise. So if I can give a more positive take on the whole thing, I think what the data tells us that I've mapped out 3 really key areas that to focus on. If that's helpful, I can just share those. So I think really improving leadership communication has to be a number 1 priority, because whatever's happening, the proverbial's hitting the fan, but it's how you react to it as a leadership team that's going to have the outcome. So that, are you familiar with that management sentence? E plus R equals O. So event happens, stuff happens. How you react to it dictates the outcome. The only thing you can affect is the reaction. And so your communication and your transparency about all of these questions that we're dealing with and your approach to them really help create that sense of security and trust and people wanting to stay with you and go the mile. I think addressing declining employee well-being has to be central, because you haven't got a business unless you've got healthy, well-adjusted people coming in every day and being productive. So a supportive, positive environment. And yes, you're not therapists or psychologists, but addressing the early stage stuff and having mental health first aiders, having a culture of respect and inclusion, trying to reduce some of that tightness and frustration and improve that employee well-being is really key. So communication, looking at your employee well-being across the board, and then looking at recognition and development. So training and development does seem to be doing well. I think there's more that could be done around recognition. It doesn't have to cost a lot, but having a recognition program, kind of a collegiate, people like star charts, sticker charts, we're all children at heart. What is it that you can do to help them through their professional development and get that recognition along the way? So out of all the qual data that we crunched for the Alliance, I would say those 3 come up trumps. Don't use that word, Annabel.
Don't use that word. Don't use that word.
Priorities. Yeah.
Don't use that word. Brilliant.
I'm going to have to look on my vodka. It's actually water.
Yes, we know it isn't. Right, brilliant. Well, that is fantastic. And what I do wonder, maybe for next time, is it would be good to have a look at the pre and post data for COVID to see what the shifts have been, and see if we can correlate that to economic activity in the UK in terms of GDP, business performance of agencies. And also, I think the great one is also place of work, because I still firmly believe that communications are impacted by people physically not being in the office. And I will go to my grave believing that the case. I'm not very modern in that respect. And I also believe that actually some of the benefits, particularly for younger people, of actually being in an environment where they're learning from each other and they're creating a buzz, and it is make it more fun again. I go to a lot of agencies and it's so quiet. Everyone's down, they've got their headsets on, they're looking at their computers. There's little engagement, and again, it wasn't like that always. So brilliant as ever, Annabel. Thank you very much indeed. Ollie, I'm going to bring you on, if I may, into the spotlight. And we will begin round two. Okay. Just need to, you can go full screen with that when you're able.
Yeah, it's just loading. There we go.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Brilliant.
Great. And yeah, great to be back here. I think 6 months on from when I was last here. So I'm going to give you a bit of an update on what our polling is showing in terms of public and business sentiment at the moment, and highlight some of the trends we're seeing as well. I'm going to start off with the general public side of things, particularly sort of, relation to the Labour government that's been in place for just over a year now. I suppose just a bit of context setting. Some of you may well keep up to date with the latest polling on all of this kind of stuff. And if you have, you'll have seen it's a very tough time for Labour at the moment. All the voting intention polling, which is, a little bit pointless in a way at the moment because there's no impending election. But all of that data points to Reform being slightly ahead of Labour, and the Conservatives kind of being nowhere. And some of that pattern is reflected in our own polling as well. So just to start things off, we sort of track amongst the public how favourably they feel towards certain figures within government and the government overall. And you can see the figures from earlier this month showing that overwhelmingly people are much more likely to be unfavourable than favourable towards the government overall, but also Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. There's still quite a high don't know figure on Rachel Reeves. I think if you think about the public at large, they may not be quite so attuned to her and maybe some of the struggles she's had with her time as Chancellor over the past year or so. But on the whole, you've kind of got nearly twice as many people saying they're unfavourable to the government and these individuals than compared to those who are favourable. And if anything, that sort of discontent is growing as well. We're seeing that trend. Interestingly, just looking at some of the sort of demographic subgroups, so women and older people are more likely to be unfavourable to the government and Keir Starmer. Looking regionally, those in London are much more likely to be favourable compared with any other region of the UK, which may reflect the makeup of their sort of voting behaviour. But it's a really, really tough time for the government in terms of public perceptions. And I think they are suffering from some of the decisions they're making, which are being very unpopular around, it started off with older people and removing the winter fuel allowance. More recently, looking at universal credit and benefits and stuff. That's the stuff that gets in the news. That's the stuff which people hook onto, and it's stuff which has a material and immediate effect on voters as well. So anything which is seen as sort of maybe good progress by the Labour government and any announcements that they make around it just gets hidden and doesn't get the sort of attention of the public. Another question we ask is, which of the following do you think would make the best Prime Minister? I think this reflects some of the patterns you see in other polling, with Reform making real progress. Keir Starmer is just still seen as best Prime Minister, but Nigel Farage very much hot on his heels. You can see Kemi Badenoch kind of trailing quite considerably there compared with those two. Keir is more popular amongst men and younger people, and Farage is considerably more popular amongst those in the sort of older age group of 55 plus. I think this is interesting. We ask a question, basically, which of these comes closest to your views? And we ask, you can see the legend at the bottom there, whether people like that individual and policies through to dislike that individual and their policies, and sort of a mixed match in between. What's really interesting here, I think if you look at the bottom one related to Keir Starmer, you've got nearly half of people saying they dislike him as a person and his policies. On Nigel Farage, it's much more divided. So you've got roughly equal proportions saying they like him and his policies and dislike him and his policies. He's a divisive character, that isn't surprising. But that 32% there is very similar to the 3 in 10 we saw on the previous slide, who think he would make the best Prime Minister. We don't have this chart comparing Labour with Reform, but we do ask it Labour versus Conservative. I think this reflects kind of the fact that the Tories are kind of nowhere at the moment, but also reflects, I think, limited progress Labour are making on some of these policy areas. So overall, Labour are seen as best placed to manage on most of these policy issues. Towards the left-hand side, you can see that where the gap is the greatest, so things around housing and health, education, transport, they're seen as much more capable than the Conservatives. As you start moving towards the right, it becomes much more neck and neck between the two parties. I think what's interesting actually is that sort of gap in between, the white space there, is essentially people saying don't know. Which is for a lot of these things is around the sort of 3 in 10 mark, which is most of them, most of these policy areas. Whether that's genuinely don't know, or whether that is also some people wanting someone else maybe perform on some of these things, I think that's probably quite likely. When it comes to what the most important issues are for the public at the moment, we've still got those sort of core top 4 of cost of living, health and the NHS, immigration and the economy. They're sort of the clear top 4. I think cost of living still continues to bite for most people. It's also the thing which kind of most impacts people day to day as well. Interestingly, we saw immigration sort of leapfrog economy compared with 6 months ago. Perhaps some of the stuff in the news around the boats coming over from France, that's in the media quite a lot at the moment, might explain that. There are some interesting differences when you look at that sort of life stage here as well. So cost of living is particularly the top issue for those in the sort of middle age bracket. So those who are most likely to have families, jobs, most likely maybe on average to feel the squeeze day to day. Health and immigration, more of an issue for older people, and then the economy sees a bit of an uptick when it comes to the younger generation. So that's the public. I'm going to move on to the overall sort of business outlook that we're seeing at the moment. And before I do, I think there's some really interesting trends here. You'll see from the selection of charts that I've got that overall business optimism is growing at the moment, which might seem counterintuitive. But there are other sort of wider studies I'll mention as we go through, which kind of back that up. But it's particularly amongst larger businesses, and SMEs are having, I think, a very different experience at the moment, which some of you may recognize. There's always been a gap in sort of optimism comparing large businesses versus SMEs, but that gap has grown, I think, and quite considerably in some cases. So you'll watch out for those sort of patterns as we look through. Staying on sort of the views related to the Labour government to start with. So we asked, how optimistic or pessimistic are you about the impact of the Labour government on your business? You can immediately see here the difference in views comparing SMEs to large businesses. So on one hand, views amongst SMEs completely split, roughly same proportions saying they're optimistic and pessimistic. Looking at large businesses, that changes completely to a sort of overwhelming feeling of optimism. And if you look back, comparing that 72% who are optimistic to July last year, which was obviously the first month when Labour came in, that was at 60%. So that is a significant rise over that period. And I think that just reflects the very different challenges and experiences smaller businesses have. And if you break that down even further into number of employees, the very smallest business, sole traders, micro businesses, the trend there is to be very much dipping much more into the pessimistic than optimistic. And optimism then increases the more employees you have and the larger you are, essentially. And that pattern holds true for everything that I'm going to walk you through, including then we ask a very similar question, optimism versus pessimism in terms of the impact of Labour government on the UK economy. Very, very similar figures you can see there in terms of the split opinion amongst SMEs and much more optimistic amongst larger businesses. When we ask about what are the biggest sort of challenges facing your business over the next year, I think there's a couple of interesting things here. And while sort of, rising prices are always going to be seen, I think, as a challenge for businesses and a potential concern looking to the future, there are a couple of things which have kind of risen up the list compared with 6 months ago. One is increased competition. and the other is cybersecurity. And things like, and they're still going to be a challenge and they're still top of mind, obviously, but remaining profitable, cash flow, they were in, I think, the top 4 previously. Customer demand was up there higher as well, and that's just dropped off a little bit. They're still in the top sort of 6, 7 issues there. But it might reflect, if we're seeing growing optimism, the fact that maybe some businesses are now worrying about increased competition rather than dropping customer demand, at least for those larger businesses, sort of points to the fact that maybe they're seeing opportunity for growth and how they can be more competitive rather than looking out for that sort of drop in demand or remaining profitable. Obviously, that's not the case for all businesses, but there's a slight shift there, and that wasn't the case sort of 6 months ago. If we look 6 months before that, those sort of patterns weren't really evident. This is a question we've trended right back to, I suppose, soon after COVID was around, and you can see that there's a continued growing optimism for business growth. So in the next 12 months, how do you expect your business to change? The proportion saying grow is now up at 60%. There are other surveys out there which are showing quite similar things. So particularly I was looking at the Lloyd's Business Barometer yesterday, and that showed their business confidence levels highest in 9 years, with economic optimism at a 10-year high and very much on an upward trajectory as well. So I realize that this chart might sort of be at odds with kind of how some of you may be feeling about your own businesses. Again, I'll show you the difference between smaller businesses and large businesses in a minute. But overall, we're seeing more optimism when it comes to business growth, and that is backed up by other index measures that are out there. Another one we've looked at is the Grant Thornton one, which showed, again, good business optimism. That pattern is very much mirrored when we ask about the particular industry sector. So very, very similar patterns there. This is the breakdown when we look at it versus sort of large businesses versus small businesses. So the top 2 pie charts there are asking about growth of your own business, bottom 2 are industry sector. But you can see the sort of much bigger green segments, to put it simply, comparing large businesses and smaller businesses. So 84% of large businesses saying they expect to grow in the next 12 months, 52% of smaller businesses. So, you know, it's still very much an expectation on balance that smaller businesses will grow versus decline. Only 16% of smaller businesses felt they were likely to decline over the next 12 months. One other survey we run is for the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the LCCI. We've been running that quarterly for, I think, over 10 years now, and we do ask a couple of measures in that around, firstly, business confidence and then broader economic outlook. I should point out that this survey is representative of London businesses, so it's heavily weighted towards micro businesses and SMEs. There's very few large businesses in here. I think a few interesting patterns there. We can see that turnover expectations and profitability expectations pretty steady over the last couple of years, a few ups and downs. On balance, in fact, still very much in positive. So we ask, the proportion expects turnover and profits to increase versus decline, and that little dotted line on against the 0 there is the sort of net figure. So anything above that is good overall. So that's holding up quite nicely. We do see a little bit of a decline over the last few quarters when it comes to overall company prospects after seeing that really rise out of the doldrums following COVID. I think one thing which we ask in that survey, which might explain it, is around capacity utilization, i.e. are businesses like sort of operating at full capacity? And that's actually a little bit down at the moment. So that might sort of, while turnover and profitability holding up, if businesses aren't sort of operating at full tilt, that might sort of temper expectations on growth and maybe overall company prospects. When it comes to overall economic outlook for both the UK, the blue line, and London, the purple line, again, pretty static over the last couple of quarters, down compared with a year ago and sort of in negative territory. What that means is that more London businesses expect the sort of economic outlook to worsen in both the UK and London than those who expect it to improve. A couple of interesting patterns across this as well, both this chart and the one before. Larger businesses, although I said there's not many in this survey, it's mainly micro and small businesses, but the larger businesses more positive on all of these things, and also those based in inner London compared with outer London. Finally, and I think Annabel touched on it previously, we can't ignore, I think, how AI is going to be changing all of our businesses, and I think all of us working in agency world will need to be thinking about how we adapt our offer to clients and how we bring AI into our sort of working lives for us internally, but also our clients. So we ask a few questions around AI in the survey. So the pie chart there is which of the following best describes your organization's use of AI so far. 45% already using it, 27% exploring using it, and then the pink there, 20% have got apparently no plans to use AI at all at the moment. I think it's in the next 12 months was the question. What's interesting for me is if you look back a year, that 45% already using AI, that's up from 29% a year ago. Couple of other interesting figures I will pull out. That 45% increases to 68% for larger businesses, and the 20% no plans to use AI in the next 12 months is only 1% for large businesses. So it's again being adopted at very different levels and at different paces, depending on size of business. You can see on the right-hand side how businesses are currently investing in AI. A mixture there of purchasing from suppliers or using free tools, a smaller proportion having developed their own AI. We ask another question as well. Do you agree or disagree? AI is a game-changing technology that will transform how your business will operate. Not surprisingly, most agree, 67% agree, but that increases again to 87% of large businesses. So I think there is a challenge for smaller businesses here in terms of how in agency life we adopt AI and keep pace with our competitors and keep pace with our clients' expectations of how we use AI as well. I'm going to stop there, but really happy to answer any questions around any of that. I suppose quick summary before I do. Cost of living, NHS, immigration, economy, still the top 4 issues amongst the public. Far from convinced about the impact the Labour government are having right now, and there doesn't really seem to be a way out of that from all of the polling that's out there. I think a really interesting trend is that business outlook does seem to be getting more positive, but there's a real stark difference between the experiences of small businesses and large businesses. AI adoption unsurprisingly accelerating, but at different paces depending on business size. So I will leave it there, but happy to take any questions.
Oliver, thank you very much indeed. Lots of reasons to be cheerful, I think. We all dwell on the negatives at the moment, but I think there's some positive to be taken out of that. One of the things that strikes me is that, and it's probably true of a lot of the independent agencies, they're all relatively small businesses, is we seem to be preoccupied with focusing on trying to drive new business from the UK. And I think one of the things that larger organisations are doing is obviously spreading their wings and looking to benefit from some of the deals that have been done around the world and looking to take markets like the Middle East in particular, Saudi at the moment, and Dubai, and also North America. We represent outstanding value for money, and agencies should be basically trying to build rapport with partners in those spaces. So something to look into further, I think. In fact, we'll be looking at that, which brings me around to the conference in the autumn. And for those that aren't aware, Pimento is going to be producing a conference on the 7th of October. So get that in your diaries now. The whole conference is dedicated to new business, and it's entitled The Festival of New Business. So you're all welcome to join us. It should be a really good day, well spent in London. Lots more of that over the next few weeks from Teresa. And we've also got a couple of events, I think, coming up this week. So if you happen to be anywhere near Leeds tomorrow, we have the 6 p.m. club in Leeds. Do come along and join us. In the meantime, I've got a few questions here. There's the full list. There you go. BD Club. We take a break after tomorrow. just because everybody is away, there's no point in us basically putting in events while people are away. There will be still an update on a weekly basis of other people's events that we get access to. But we're back on the 10th of September with the Business Development Club, the BD Club. We have a 6 p.m. club in Manchester at Tangerine, and a series of roundtables with Pimento Fuse, which is our new business academy, and then the 5 p.m. club, which is our online version of the 6 p.m. club in October. So loads of activities. You are all more than welcome. Members will be fully aware of those events. Okay, Jeremy has some questions for you. If you could take that off screen. Thank you. Ollie, have you got a breakdown on the type of businesses that responded, the sectors?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix, it's sort of cross-sector. So we've got, let me just have a quick look. So yeah, we've got sort of representatives from across sort of IT, tech, comms, retail and wholesale, manufacturing, construction, business, finance, professional services. It's a real mix across sectors. I'm interested to around the point around the slightly odd responses on AI. I don't know if you can expand a little bit more on that, Jeremy.
Yeah, only I thought it is odd that the smaller businesses didn't seem to be embracing AI opportunities as much as you think they would, given they're the ones that most obviously benefit from all the time saving and extra resource that AI can provide. I thought larger businesses might be more stick in the mud with their existing processes, and the smaller, more nimble outfits may embrace the opportunities it provides. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it might reflect, I suppose, the type of businesses as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The sector
sort of worlds they're in. I think it's different if you're a small small agency. You're going to be looking at how you can use AI from both an efficiency perspective and also benefit to client. If you're a small micro business doing some sort of construction work, then that's probably going to be less relevant for you. So it might be a reflection of that potentially.
Sure.
Any other questions? A couple more that I think just popped in.
There's one there, yes, from John. 17% cited keeping up with tech advances of business challenge. So to be clear on that slide, it's ranked according to the proportion of people who put each of those challenges in their top 3 challenges. So it doesn't mean necessarily the other things below that are not a challenge at all for businesses. It's more of a sort of, I suppose, comparative view on things as to what is most important. So it might reflect, we are seeing quite good across a lot of these businesses, AI adoption and plans to adopt new technologies. So it might reflect that a little bit, but it doesn't mean that businesses are, if it's 17%, doesn't mean that the other 83% are saying it's not a challenge at all. It's just that it's less of a challenge potentially than some of those other things.
One of the interesting, Ollie, is that we've seen a massive surge in new memberships from agencies at the start of the year, and it's continued. And one of the reasons they're citing is obviously new business is important, but actually beyond new business, it's the ability to learn from each other, in particular from the AI adoption spaces, and actually what good looks like, how they can use it in their business, not just to refine content development and web development and insight and research, but they're using it across other areas like improving the performance, measuring the output from the team, looking at ways in which they can actually streamline processes, etc. And it's quite difficult to know how to do that unless you either engage and employ somebody to come in to look at the business as a whole, or you learn from other practitioners in the same field as yourself. So something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're part of a wider group of brands within Next 15 as our parent company. We're working with others within that group to look at AI adoption, all that kind of stuff as well.
Biggest issue appears to be no one knows who has authority within medium-sized to larger organizations, and it's very siloed. So you have HR doing their own thing, finance doing their own thing, IT doing their own thing, marketing doing their own thing. And very often there's no overarching strategy as a business and how to actually go forward. And actually that's where agencies, I think, if they are in the AI space and they are in the consulting space, can do well with brands. We've got about 4 agencies in that space and they're getting loads of consultancy work. and then the spin-off opportunities then for development. So worth thinking about. Okay, any further questions? Otherwise, what I will suggest is we close it there and thank our two speakers and thank you all for attending. It's been great to have so many of you on today's call. I think we had 41 people at one point, which is a pretty good number for a midweek when you're all so busy. And just want to thank both Annabel, I hope you feel better, and Oliver, great to see you again. And this will be available on the Pimento TV channel, which is on YouTube. You just go to YouTube and type in Pimento Agency, and I think there's something like 400 hours worth of programming on there now. So take a look. By all means, share the data, but please, 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 obviously make sure that you credit Savanta and Question and Retain when quoting it. Lovely. See you all soon. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye for
Thanks
now.
so much.